I'm Sister Pat Murray. I'm the Executive Secretary of the International Union for Superiors General. Leadership, we need leaders in the church and the world today. And I think sisters as leaders bring an important dimension because they're very involved with people in their ordinary daily lives. I think we always envisage that leaders somehow are out front leading and directing some initiative or project. But more and more within religious life, we sisters see ourselves as in and among people, particularly those who are in difficulty or on the margins or suffering in any way. So what does a leader do when you're in among the people? I think you listen. And often you have to listen for a long time. I have an experience myself of being involved in South Sudan after the war. And we visited the people in many different parishes and dioceses. And we spent 3 weeks sitting, listening. And I suppose I would have thought then as a leader I would have been coming to do something, to give something. But in fact, at the end of each session, the people stood up and just said, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to us. We thought the world had forgotten about us. We thought the church had forgotten about us." So I learned in that experience the importance of listening. Listening is a gift because I think as people express themselves and their own needs, it really helps them to shape what they know they will need to do for themselves. So I think we underestimate the power of listening. So as a leader, I think as sisters, we need first of all to be listeners. Secondly, I think we have a role in empowering people themselves, whether it's young people who are looking for meaning in life, whether it's older people who feel alone and maybe abandoned at times, or whether it's people on the margins of society. I think within each person, we need as leaders to help people to unfold their own truth, their own wisdom, and their own capacity. And how do you do that as a leader? You do that when you accompany the other. And in accompanying one another, a leader is enriched by the people among whom she or he is with, but also hopefully shares some of their own gifts, their own wisdom, their own experience. So more and more, and particularly as Pope Francis talks about his synodal journey, you know, within the church, we are the people of God. So we all bring our different capacities and gifts. And I think this is the challenge for humanity. People together, walking together, trying to create a better world for all. Some will be believers, many won't be believers. But I think every human being wants a better life for himself or herself and a better life for others. In Catholic Sisters, we would probably say, we would quote St. John's Gospel and say, you know, we want to give fullness of life to people. And I think when people experience fullness of life, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, physically, they experience a fullness of their dignity. And I think that's been my learning as a leader. In the beginning, I would have thought it was about great big projects to change the world. Now I realize that you change the world one mustard seed at a time. So one little change of mind and heart, because an internal change has to happen first before you can change the externals. When we change inside ourselves, then we can cross barriers to the other person who's maybe different to me. Together then we can seek solutions. For example, in the days we're living in, seeking solutions for peace, I worked for some years in Northern Ireland, a very divided society between Protestant and Catholic. They didn't know each other. But much of the work was spent building relationships, not only across the cities and the countryside, but building relationships one at a time. And then you form a group who together can make change in society. So that's my image, really, of leadership and transformation and change. It's slow work, but when you're committed and passionate about it, you won't give up when you come across hardship. And I think, again, our gospel way of life as sisters, we know that actually it's in the difficulties, in the vulnerability, in the challenges, that somehow there is where the change lies. You know, I have a lovely quote from a writer, a theological writer, who says, God saves us through the chinks and the cracks in our armour. And that's why we have these flaws in ourselves as human beings, that it's through really our vulnerability, that if we listen to that vulnerability, explore that vulnerability, we discover our deeper humanity. And it's that deeper humanity can bring about change. Yeah, I think people today are experiencing personal vulnerability, but also vulnerability in communal living. You know, often differences between ethnic groups or classes or different types of people. There's a fracturing that seems to be happening in human society today, even between one country and another, or one part of a country and another. So I think we're touching into, I think there's a vulnerability in people's search for meaning in life. You know, what does this all mean? What's the meaning of my personal life? I'm very convinced that it's when we pay attention to what's happening to ourselves as a person, when I'm in touch with my own fragility and vulnerability, then I'm open to explore how it is I must speak out for those who are literally much more vulnerable than I am. Those suffering, migrants and refugees, people who are trafficked, the earth that's being destroyed, our common home that's crumbling, really. And I think in my own fragility, I know I have to care for that fragility. So I have to care for my brothers and sisters who are suffering in some way. I have to care for the earth and its people. Pope Francis calls us to that. So in wanting to do that, one way I can do that is by speaking out. Not in an aggressive and way, or in a way that condemns, but in a way that calls for change. And in a way that calls for a change where all of us, as young and old, rich and poor, can collaborate together and bring about some change. Because it's in sharing our resources, both our personal resources and also our financial, economic resources, that we can change the world we're living in. And I think young people today, they're calling for that change. So I, as an older person, I want to be alongside young people who are advocating for change. I think we as sisters can bring the experience of our lives in different parts of the world, but I think we can bring that alongside other voices, younger voices, different voices, who together, and that together, we can say we could live together in a different way. So I think we need to find different meetings, fora, different conventions, writing, There are different ways in which we can advocate. And above all, I think we as sisters would say we can advocate with God through prayer. That we put the needs of people before God. You know, today I heard a most moving story from one of the sisters from Germany. It was really very touching. She's the Superior General of a German congregation that has houses in Poland and in Slovakia. And there are many Ukrainian refugees in the houses in Poland. And the sisters invited her to go. But she said, do the refugees want me to come? Because she said, we Germans don't have a very good image at the moment in Europe vis-a-vis how we're handling this political situation. So the sisters contacted her and said, yes, they do want you to come. So she travelled and they came out and they hugged her as if she was their mother, to whom they were coming home to their mother. And she said they cried. She said my shoulder was wet with their tears, and she said my habit was wet with my own tears. So she asked them to write their names, and some of them were Christians, Orthodox or Catholic, others were Muslims. So she said, write your name and your religion on this piece of paper if you would like. And she said, this list will remain on our altar in our convent, and we will never forget you. So, you know, we can raise our voices in the public square, but I think we also have to raise our voice to God.